You're with Patrick Henningsen on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Internet. A stream online.
TNTRadio.live. Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hour number one of this live broadcast. Thank you for rejoining us. I want to welcome onto the program independent journalist and researcher from France, Freddie Ponton, is joining us on the live stream right now. Freddie, how are you?
I'm very good, Patrick. Good to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you as well, Freddie. And more good news coming out of Ukraine. Links between Burisma Holdings, Hunter Biden's former employee, and funding of terrorism. We'll talk about that as well. Also, big story out of the Middle East. The revelations about the AI system used by the IDF called Lavender. And the results of this, nothing short of barbaric and horrific. The slick AI system, as it's marketed on the surface, has horrific ramifications on the other end. We'll talk about that as well. And Freddie, this isn't the first time that this story's come up with this terrorist slush fund in Ukraine. And we talked about this in previous shows. I did also talk about this with yourself, as well as Italian-American journalist Simona Mangianti, after she interviewed Andrei Derkash, a Ukrainian whistleblower, former parliamentarian. We posted that interview in its full length at 21stcenturywire.com back in January. And if you remember, Freddie, this is exactly what Derkash said at the end, that there's a slush fund through all of this embezzling, all of this money laundering in Ukraine, all this money coming from the West, sloshing through, is ending up financing assassinations, terror, black ops. Wouldn't be the first time, would it, Freddie? Shades of Central America, Iran-Contra, the list goes on and on and on. What do you think?
Well, as you said, this is a long story in the making. So since 2014, there's been a lot of activities in Ukraine on many fronts. And one of them was clearly to put together a front to allow a major intelligence operation in Ukraine, conducting many different asymmetric activities. So for those that many journalists have looked into it, investigative journalists, and they've done a pretty good job, at identifying Burisma as a company that seems to have a lot of anomalies to it. And it is sure that having someone like Hunter Biden, the son of the actual president of the United States, on board at the time of this company was highly suspicious. And then, of course, when you look at the various characters involved in this saga, with a Ukrainian minister for natural resources being the owner of a privately owned oil and gas company, with assets pretty much managed from Cyprus, then you get already pretty much the bulk of a story here that is worth looking into it. And then, of course, you add to that people like Coffee Black and other interesting characters like the former president of Poland as well. You're starting
Cofer
to
Black, by the way. Cofer Black, let's just say, who is Cofer Black? The former CIA head, is he not?
Yeah, I mean, Cofer Black has worked, for the CIA for 30 years. So he's a counterterrorism specialist, and he was pretty much an ambassador at large for the CIA and counterterrorism activities for the United States. So someone that has had a career really crazy. I mean, if you look at his resume, you're going to, start in Africa, and then you're going to basically travel around the world. He had running a company that, was sold to Raytheon. And then this guy is interested and has basically his hand in many, many pies. So that made him, of course, a very interesting character to look into. And there's no doubt that the Russian Federation Investigative Committee have had his eyes its eyes on someone like Coffer Black for a very long time. So I think the interesting and the difficulty at the same time to draw pictures of what really is going on is really about looking into both Hunter Biden's, why Hunter Biden is on board of a company like Burisma. He has no past, obviously, in the oil and gas industry. He's legally trained, but he's not really working on that particular front in Burisma. So obviously the main question to start is, what is he doing there? And very quickly, when you start to dig in, and I'll pass you the details, but really very quickly you realize that he's part of an intelligence operation. Now, I'm not saying he is intelligence, but I'm saying is that he's definitely aware that there is an intelligence project run out of Burisma. And his role is to open the door, because it is quite clear now that the CIA wanted to directly confront the Russians' interests and Gazprom interest in the regions, and they wanted to move the entire gas industry away from the Russians, basically eat their cakes and then make these cakes theirs, and then moving it to NATO, US/US, So it's very evident. And I think when we look into it, I think it's you can put and cross a couple of dots very quickly and realize that it was an entire operation. And we all remember that this ongoing fight for Naftogaz, the control of the public-owned leading corporation for gas in Ukraine, and George Soros and Putin's are fighting over the control of this organization. So, yes, there was definitely an intelligence operation. What is suggested and submitted here is the possibility that Burisma, with certain actors like Coffer Black, which has a huge past in counterterrorism, we found him also on board of the one of the Baltic banks in Latvia. He's basically a member of the council there, and this bank very soon after is going down for money laundering. So that's just to give you an idea of the kind of characters you're dealing with. But all in all, I think
hold on for a minute. You've got CIA, you've got shell companies, dodgy banks, money laundering, Freddie. This sounds so familiar. I'm getting BCCI vibes right now. Am I completely out of the narrative here? What?
No, you're not. I mean, this is really the old BCCI corporate raiders, in action. So of course you're going to have a lot of intelligence involved into that, especially if you talk about a BCCI. And then the corporate raiders, pretty much, kind of operate the same way, and they cannot operate, without the banking facilities, because banking is a big part of that. So you'll find the usual legal companies. You're going to find obviously the banks that's going to accommodate these kind of deals, and if they don't have a bank, then they'll buy a license and create one so that the money can be basically flowing in. And then for that, don't forget, you need a corporate front as well, because you're going to need to justify where the money comes from, where the money is going. So if you have a company that has kind of addresses in Cyprus. At the time, Cyprus was very dodgy. So there's a lot of things you could do. You can justify just to get it clear, but again, a lot of these organizations, a lot of these people involved in this work, even on the banking side, advertise how they're compliant, how much they're working against, financing terrorism and all that kind of things. But on the other side, that same bank is falling for money laundering. So what's going on here? So again, I think that we can see that this is really the US format in that sense. It's the same as they do when they move into a country. They'll promise you gold, and at the end you're left with a country with a pile of dead people and a pile of rubbles. Well, it's the same for the banking. They'll go in there, they'll switch it the way they want to use it. When it's done the job, they pull out, the bank goes down, become insolvent, and on and on. So as I said, Coffer Black is very intriguing as a character. I mean, you could do literally a movie about Coffer Black, and as I say, he's got no credential in the oil and gas industry like Biden. So what are these guys doing on board of Burisma? So I think the Russian Investigative Committee is looking into it. And clearly, Coffer Black is not a small guy. I mean, as I say, he became a council member of the Baltic International Bank, in Latvia. So he's someone that has obviously the entries and the trust, to be placed, in a right environment, in the right outfit to serve a purpose. When that purpose is served, he gets to move on, without being, worried or concerned or intimidated by anybody. So it is what it is. But as I said, there reminds me this whole time of Arm and Hammer and, the Robert Maxwell and all these goldsmiths, all these corporators, at the time. And then just BCCI story, of course, with Samuel Pizar. I remember looking, because we've been working for now 2 years on addressing real pictures of who Samuel Pizar truly was. It's the stepfather of Antony Blinken. And it was an interesting person because he spent a lot of time in France, and he obviously, his son too as well, Blinken spent some time in France as well. So we kind of retraced a little bit their life in our country. And it's very, very crazy to find out that Samuel Pizar was, literally offering the BCCI to some Lebanese dodgy tycoon, So we can clearly see that the Maxwell, the corporate writers, the Samuel Pizar, there is,
So just to be clear, Samuel Pizar was also a lawyer for Robert Maxwell, who is the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the fixer for Jeffrey Epstein, his partner in his international trafficking and blackmail ring. So it's all interesting how all of that is weaved together. And Tony Blinken never is asked about this in the media. It's a hands-off policy. Don't talk about it. Don't inquire. Who is Tony Blinken? What's his real profile? What's his real job? Who does he actually work for? These are all sort of legitimate questions that we're going to bring up. But let's get back to the Burisma terror story, if we will. We've got a video clip here. This is a journalist and human rights lawyer Arnaud Devalet, also author of the new book. It's out today as it goes, Foreign Entanglements. We've got him here with RT International just last night. Let's roll this clip.
Now, there hasn't been a direct link made to the Crocus City Hall terror atrocity, but judging from the allegations that we're hearing, is it more likely than not that the oil and gas company Burisma Holdings was involved in some way in financing that attack?
Well, this is something that the Russian Investigative Committee is going to have to determine, to be sure. But this is nothing new. I actually have a book coming out tomorrow called Foreign Entanglements, which covers the Burisma-Biden saga. And this goes back to 2014. We know that there were bribes paid to close out some of the case files against Dan Sloshevsky, the CEO of Burisma. And the company became essentially a vehicle to launder taxpayers' money. I would point also to the tapes released by, or made public, should I say, by Andrei Derkash, the former Ukrainian MP, back in 2020 on this issue, in which he perfectly establishes all the links, whether about Hunter Biden, the Naftogaz situation with Austin. And now we have an interview that came out recently from Minsk by Simona Magionte. She interviewed Derkash, who is now in hiding, fearing for his life. Blinken came in January 2022 in Kiev and basically told the Zelensky regime, you've got to resolve the Derkash situation or else we will do it ourselves.
So the gangster, Tony Blinken, this is like straight out of The Godfather, sending, the son shows up saying, you got to deal with this Derkash problem. So what did Derkash do? He blew the whistle on this slush fund, among other things, by the way, the reverse gas scandal. A lot of these things trace back to Burisma, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden. But this terrorist slush fund he mentioned was particularly interesting because you're talking about money scraped from USAID, scraped from all this Western aid that's been pouring into the country, all these sort of embezzlement operations, money laundering, all the things you mentioned, Freddie. And then assassinations, terror attacks, black ops, all this stuff funded from this kind of gray slush fund connected to all these fake or dodgy companies, Burisma Holdings being one of them. And Derkash says all this and then is being threatened with sanctions by the Ukrainian government, forced into hiding outside the country. And then Blinken, according to Derkash, came to Kiev and basically said, to Zelensky, get rid of this guy or we will. I mean, that's the way I read that. I can't think of any other way to read that, Freddie. I mean, what do you think?
Well, as I said, Blinken had the opportunity to learn from the best, from Samuel Pizarro. So if you spend most of your life surrounded with corporate raiders, there's an aspect of it that is, you can wear a tie or a bow tie. Doesn't make you less of a gangster. So there's a bit of a gangster kind of attitude going on that we're going to deal with it. And there's a bit of a power trip, if you will, in that sense, and especially because the nature of the information the cash has in its possessions are clearly embarrassing for the U.S. administration because it reveals many things, amongst which the interconnection between the operation on the covert operation conducted by the SBU and the GRU, so that money flows in and out. People are getting something out of it. That's what the natures of the intelligence community. I've looked into it for many years, and you can only come to the conclusion that if you were to talk about a CIA or MI6, or it doesn't matter, any kind of intelligence community seems to have two outfits. One that is for the public, that has genuine people working for them, people extremely skilled and genuine about, protecting national security interest and homeland security. And then on the other side, you get that rogue version of the CIA or MI6 that's go out there doing things, moving cash around, and doing everything that is simply just not authorized. And one hand never meet the others, if you will. So you can be an analyst of the CIA on one side, on counterterrorism, like I know I've seen you've interviewed Larry not so long ago, and
Larry Johnson.
Right.
Yeah,
Larry
we had a conversation with Larry Johnson on the Sunday Wire.
He's the best to tell you exactly how this thing works. He was inside, so he'll know exactly the protocol and how and what it takes basically to get an operation like that off the ground, especially in a country like Ukraine. So, as I said, they get to see one side of the outfit, and they're aware of the other side, but how it works, who's really involved, all that kind of things is it's like the dark web. You need to get in there and really be familiar with that environment, and more importantly, you need to be entrusted to do and work as an operative for that. So Coffee Black is a great and is an interesting character because he's old school. He comes back from this old time, 70s, 80s, was in Africa. There's the Safari Club. I mean, so many stories we could talk about, of course, of a CIA covert operation with the French and so on. But what's really interesting at this moment in time is really to understand that this slush fund that Dakash is talking about, this is really about building a financial network that allows availability for funds to sponsor certain operations and making sure this operation and the financial associated with it never make it to the daylight, if you will. So it's all, as I say, important to have many companies, a network of companies that can provide, as I say, the invoice, their proof of activities, and so on. All that feeds into the complex of money laundering. There's no money laundering without invoice, without proof of funds, without proof of origin of the funds, and so on. So you need to construct that. You need legal a guy that's going to work on setting up all these paperworks that's going to be reviewed, and that's going to have to be basically vetted in order for your operation to look kind of legit, you know. So that's what you have. So, but we've done this homework already, and we can only come to the conclusion that this Burisma, amongst others, was a front that is directly linked, you know, for the purpose of asymmetric warfare activities conducted against Russia. So whether it is economic terrorism or whether it is pure terrorism and sabotage as well, then this is where the money will be directed towards such, you know, that kind of operation, if you will. And that is the reason why I'm not surprised, you know, because we've always suspected Burisma to be a CIA front. But what's interesting is to see the CIA people involved at the highest level in that. And if you do your homework properly, you're going to understand why Poland and the Polish president was a member of Burisma. There's a reason for that, and I found it. There's also other reason why, if you look into it properly, it links back to the Nord Stream sabotage. So it's again what
that's interesting. It's interesting you say that, Freddie, because this is also what Durkash said. During his interview with Simone Mangiante, he mentioned that it was connected in some way to Nord Stream. So, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to the Nord Stream operation. Obviously, there's also red herrings, distractions, much like 9/11. Very sophisticated operation. I know you've filed a couple of excellent reports and research documents on Nord Stream, which we published at 21stcenturywire.com. I'm sure there's more to come in the future. Who knows? But what's interesting is Cofer Black. This name comes up a lot in our conversation, Freddie. Everybody ignored him. It was all Hunter Biden, Devin Archer, and, you know, whatever, John Kerry's stepson. And all these names are the ones that preoccupied the scandal of Burisma, Hunter Biden. Nobody talking about this spook, Cofer Black. And really, if you pull on that thread, that's where you get all the interesting results. So I think just briefly, I just want to ask you one more question. We got to go to break. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I say if you pull the thread, what you're going to have is the Igor Kolomoisky of the world. You're going to have the Aleksander Kłaniewski, former Polish president. You're going to get Cofer Black and Hunter Biden. That's what, when you pull the thread of that intelligence operation, these are the names that comes out, you know. And as I say, Kolomoisky is a very important piece of that puzzle as well. So you're right. It's a thread, and it needs to be pulled so that we can understand all these asymmetric warfare activities in Ukraine, because, you know, people are dying, and it's not normal that civilians you know, are the target of these operations. Now, I'm not saying the CIA did it. I don't have the proof of it, but I said the dots, when they are connected, they draw pictures, and that pictures link back to the intelligence community. That is 100%.
I think one of the stupidest moves the United States made after the terror attack in Moscow a couple of weeks ago is they came out preemptively and said, Ukraine's got nothing to do with this. Don't look at Ukraine. They're not involved, before Russia even did an investigation, and said it was ISIS. It was ISIS. Look, it's ISIS. Look, there's an ISIS website. Look, whatever, Alamak, or whatever the ISIS message board is on 4chan or whatever. They said, there it is. They've claimed responsibility. Must be ISIS. Don't look at Ukraine. Don't look at, it's not them. And of course, all the evidence traces back to where? To Ukraine, and to some of the more nefarious actors that get moved around like pawns on a chessboard from Syria to Turkey to the Caucasus to Ukraine, and then for terrorist attacks in Moscow, as it turns out, Freddie. And of course, we've spoken about that. You've also tweeted and researched on this heavily. You can just follow Freddie's account, folks, and you'll see all the facts and the receipts on everything we're talking about here, Freddie. But more than that, before we go to break, I just want to say that this should call into question everything that the United States is doing in Ukraine, has been doing for the last 15 years, including all of these extremely dodgy companies like Meta Biota, again, connected with Rosemont Seneca, Hunter Biden, seed funding from the CIA's In-Q-Tel. I mean, folks, come on. The whole biolab thing, now people should be looking at it, as we have been talking about it, as a series of CIA intelligent front stations dotted right across Ukraine on the Russian border. What a great strategic cover for any kind of operation like this, saying that, oh, we're searching for, viruses and whatnot. It's a brilliant cover.
Copper Black is involved in cancer research, in biotechnology, is involved in banking, in defense, in intelligence, in oil and gas. I mean, these guys can do pretty much, he's Superman, But to find him in cancer research and in biotechnology in Ukraine, I mean, you must wonder, what really was going on in Ukraine. Well, so you point the fingers at these biotech labs and these bioweapon labs and all that kind of things. So, I mean, I've reported on it. So there's a lot of obviously indication that anti-Biden link with Metabiota and so on, and all these guys, they all kind of Davos and so on. I mean, the whole thing is just. It really doesn't take a lot to start to realize that really we're dealing with Ukraine as Ukraine. We're starting to understand the importance of Ukraine as a platform for economic terrorism and in pure terrorism, So that's an escalation in asymmetric warfare, which we should be worried about. And I think the Russian Investigative Committee is worried about that, because we're not talking about just destabilizing here. We're talking about direct attack on civilians. So I understand that the Russians want answers, and I can see where the Russians are going with this, for sure.
Yeah. So, there's so many front companies, there's nothing better than like global public health as a sort of carte blanche to go gallivanting around across borders and pretty much go whichever you want to go with pretty much diplomatic immunity. It's a brilliant cover. If you want to infiltrate anything, if you're an intelligence apparatus, that's where you want to be. And I think this is exactly where the Americans and the British have been. EcoHealth Alliance, I think, is also in that collection of very intricate front organizations or cutout organizations. And that should give people a different viewpoint of what the so-called pandemic really was all about, among other things. But we don't want to go down that rabbit hole into the bowl of bat soup today, Freddie. So we'll just spare everybody that.
You can't. All you need to know is, and you have to keep it very simple. The truth often is in front of you, just, going through a lot of detour to try to, convince ourselves that what we are looking at is true. But the US fights anti-corruption in Ukraine, but Biden blackmailed a judge to save his sons and his son's boss. What does that tell you? Copper Black fight against the financing of terrorism, but the bank he was with in Latvia goes down for money laundering. I mean, simple things like that should really
fighting terrorism or financing terrorism. It's a fine line,
financing of terrorism. Yeah, that's what these guys are. Very fine line. A very fine line. Which is how they operate. We know how they operate. We might not know where they're operating from at all the time, because this is a moving piece. It never stays at the same place. It does serve a purpose, it's collapsed, and it moves on to another one. What you want to find is the base, that BCCI. You want to find it. If there is a major project like Ukraine, you must expect that there is a big financial construct that is available to them at all time to manipulate, move funds, because there are so many projects, derived from the Ukraine conflict, that it's moving billions of dollars on a regular basis.
Well,
and when we talk,
I got an answer. The sovereign debt scandal in Ukraine, Privat Bank, Kolomoisky's bank, the sovereign debt scandal, basically using embezzling state funds, washing it offshore, and then bringing it back in to purchase sovereign debt at a high yield interest rate. Everybody was in on that scam in America. Everyone's getting rich off that through companies like Franklin Templeton Investments, and this goes right up to the level of BlackRock. Okay, that's that's eventually, if you follow the money, goes right up to the top, to the penthouse. Okay, so it goes right to George Soros, right to BlackRock, and all these guys. So I mean, that's above the pay grade of even a lot of people in Washington, to be quite frank. So, but we're seeing the clues to this. And by the way, Arnaud Devolay has done a great job. His new book's called Foreign Entanglements. I'll tell you what, we're going to get, I'm going to call Arnaud and get him on the show tomorrow, because the book just came out on Amazon, believe it or not. So what a coincidence that his book is out at the perfect time. So he's
I'm
actually
looking
had so
forward
many,
to read his
he's
book,
had so many
actually.
delays. He's
Yeah.
had so many delays in publication on this. He's been trying to publish this for 6 months, more than 6 months, and there's always been delays. Now the book is out, so I think this is going to be a hot number. Everyone's going to want to get a hold of this book. So we're going to get Arnaud on. We're going to talk about the book and this latest story. Great timing, of course. But anyway, let's take a break. I'm with Freddie Ponton, independent journalist and researcher in France. We're breaking down the Burisma terror story. It's very interesting, folks, and it leads to all different places. Also, it leads right to the doorstep of the Biden family business, as it were. Look, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about AI in Israel, the Lavender AI software that is used, well, for genocide. Let's be frank. We'll talk about that with Freddie after the break. I'm Patrick Henningsen. We'll be right back.
You're with Patrick Henningsen on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome back to this live broadcast. We're in the final segment of the first hour. I'm joined by independent journalist and researcher Freddie Ponton. He's joining us from the Republic of France, La République. We'll talk about France maybe another time, Freddie. There's a lot going on in your part of the world, but there's also a lot going on in the Middle East. This story is very disturbing coming out of Gaza. Now, this has been released. I think it's the 975 magazine, this Israeli media outlet, that did this expose on this AI system called Lavender. And I know you've been looking into this very closely. And for those people who don't know anything about this, I know some of our listeners are already kind of familiar with this story. For those, Freddie, who don't know anything about this, in a nutshell, what is Lavender and how do they use it recently in Gaza?
Yes, you're referring to the Plus 972 magazine, but also Local Call as well. They basically both revealed the existence of a second, it's not the first one actually, but a second AI program developed by the Israeli intelligence unit 8200s. So I remember them because they had a great article about the gospel artificial intelligence program, which we can talk about it because it's coupled actually with this new AI program, which was revealed in the most recent investigation. So this is basically something which was pretty much developed and thought of by the Israeli intelligence corps unit of the Israeli Defense Force that are responsible for clandestine operation. They're known as the 8200 intelligence units, and their job is to really collect signal, if you will, intelligence known as SIGINT, and they work on code descriptions, counterintelligence, cyber warfare, military intelligence and surveillance. I mean, the entire intelligence spiel. So what they ask and what the commander of this Israeli intelligence did is that he made a case for designing a special machine that could rapidly process massive amount of data. And that was to simply generate thousands of potential targets, for military strikes. And basically, the outcome of this software was to create a kill list, if you will, something that they could use after having identifying basically all those that, according to their data, were Hamas operatives or Palestinian Islamic Jihad operative PIJ. So that's what they've did, and they call it the Lavender AI program. So very briefly, what I can tell you about the Lavender AI program is that it's a system, it's an artificial intelligence program that is primarily designed to mark people, all the suspect operative from Hamas and PIJ, and anyone that is basically considered by the IDF as people involved in the operational aspects, so the Al-Qassam Brigade and so on. I mean, there's many factions within Hamas. And so to resume the AI program called Lavender, it's really to mark people. I think that's really the main message about this program, and is to put them on a kill list. So the IDF almost completely relied, especially at the early part of the after the October the 7th, they pretty much relied on this piece of software to identify a large number of Palestinians which were suspected to be Hamas militants. And I think they managed to get about 37,000 people on that list. Can you imagine 37,000 people? That's a lot of people. And there's also a piece of information that is interesting, Patrick, is that the Lavender AI also benefit from the data generated by the Gospel AI program. And the Gospel AI program is about identifying infrastructures and building where the so-called alleged Hamas operatives are living. So on one side, you have a software that identified automatically the people in questions, where they live, where they move, and on the other side you get a kill list where these people have their names, so we know you put the building, you put their home together, and you put that person together, and then you end up with a very, very lethal piece of artificial intelligence that literally suggests, outside of any human control, whose person you need to go after. And then from that, you have an airstrike bombing list that is provided to the Israeli Air Force. And on the other side, you have obviously a kill list for operative as well on the ground. So it's a deadly machine. And I was very, very, when you start to learn information about this program, it's scary. It's literally scary. There's an application that they dubbed Where's Daddy? Where's Daddy means like they were trying to express the idea that it's important to hit the alleged operative when he comes home, when he's home with his children and his wife in his building. And that particular moment in time, this is the where is Daddy? Well, Daddy's home. That's the answer to that questions. And when he's home, well, this is the time where the IDF has instructed the Air Force to basically drop bombs. So they're dropping basically bombs on the entire building to get to one guy. So, of course, different kind of casualties are allowed depending on how many, how high or how low that particular Hamas operative is in the food chain. If he's a high commander, high value target, you can kill up to 100 people. That's completely allowed. If it's a low target, then you can kill 20 people maybe, and that's okay. That's authorized. So that's really, it's scary to see that because we are past behind international law. Israel has been promoting an IDF as an outfit that really works in line with international law, and we are simply just way beyond what is authorized by international law. So this is where we are at the moment. It's this crazy news about this basically people that from the inside were able to come out, different officers talking about what they were doing, and many of them were say that this was basically inhuman, relying on the machines to make that decision for you.
So we just got a minute. We just got a minute left. I just want to quickly ask you: do you think that they've been using this AI system since the beginning of October 7th, and could this explain the sort of rapacious kind of disregard for collateral damage period since October 7th? That over reliance on these types of systems?
Well, I think it becomes pretty much a policy after the October the 7th. If you look at the policy of the IDF prior October the 7th, this would have never flied. There's a lot of work, in part of the legal command, part of the IDF, operation responsible for this human target list. They would have to get the authorization, and that authorization process goes through a system. So people have to vet that, probably even have undergrounds, multiple ways of targeting these people before killing them, and more importantly, to be authorized to kill 20 up to 100 people in a citizen that has absolutely, civilians that have absolutely nothing to do with these guys. And the process on how you get into that list also is very challengeable because, if you change your phone, if you move addresses, or if you've worked for the government, or you might have been a contractor for the government, you're part of emergency services, suddenly you're linked to Hamas and you're a potential target, and your whole family and the entire people in the building can be killed so that they can get to you. We are, as I say, in a human target policy. That's how it's described, and that's how you can describe it. And it's called really the human machine. There was a book actually that incentivized and also promoted the idea of creating this artificial intelligence software, and it was called the human machine for a reason. How to create synergy between human and artificial intelligence. And that's really been applied across the board. We had the book exists. It's in English, so it's really interesting to see that. And also the way, how cynical it was. The kind of bomb they were using. For the low guys, low in the food chain, they will use dumb bombs. That can kill many people. And then for the high commander, they will use, something different, probably bigger.
It's just absolute devastation. Freddie, we can go further on this, and hopefully we will in the future. Freddie Ponton, independent journalist, researcher. Thank you very much for joining us on TNT this week.
It's been my pleasure.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Freddie Ponton. Follow him on X, Twitter, at LFC News Media. There's a link on our Twitter account on our show page, as well as our show posting straight to Freddie. Top of the hour news headlines coming up. Medea Benjamin on the other side, and a whole lot more. Nico House as well. It's going to be a great hour. Stay with us.